Liam, welcome to the Personal Best podcast.
Ruby, thank you so much for inviting me on.
How are you doing?
I'm very good.
Yeah.
It's a good start to the year. Busy, but good busy.
Yeah, amazing. Just going to mention for anyone who's watching this on the video that I forgot my iPad today, so I'm using my phone as notes, which means I need my glasses to see. So if I look a bit different, that'll be why. So just to start with, can I ask you to give me a little personal intro? I know you're a qualified nutritionist, which is why I've got you on, to be honest, because I do talk a lot about health and fitness on this podcast, but I really want this episode to be more of a deep dive into the nutrition side of things. So for people listening, what's your background and what does your work currently look like?
Basically, I'm trying to simplify the world of nutrition.
Yeah.
I think it's so confusing.
Yeah.
And, through my coaching business, which I run now, so we run PH Nutrition. I set that up, almost 8 years this year. So that's been running. That's my main kind of focus. However, my background is in football, so it's in elite football. So I worked at numerous different clubs: football, Fulham, Tottenham Hotspur, FC Copenhagen, and now I currently am the nutritionist for Celtic Football Club.
Yeah.
So I do that only part time now. I was full time. Set up PH Nutrition, and we work with everybody from CrossFit Games athletes all the way down to people that are stepping into the gym first time or just simply want to be healthier. It's wherever you are on that spectrum, like nutrition is still a confusing thing. So that's the main bit. I also consult with Marchon supplements in helping kind of formulate their product range, and that's a relatively new thing. So
yeah. Do you know what? You're so right that nutrition can seem so complicated, particularly when we're looking at like the online world of health and fitness. Like there's so much mixed messaging, and even when you try to do your own research, it's like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And I think you can just end up in a rabbit hole of like I don't understand what to do.
You can, I think social media, there is some incredibly useful information.
Yeah.
I genuinely think sometimes there's a massive gross oversimplification or a massive overcomplication.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the oversimplification where it's just getting a calorie deficit or eat less, move more. And for a lot of people, there's no context. And with nutrition, the C word is context. You need it with everything that you're doing. So people don't know how to create a calorie deficit or how much or how long or how do I actually even think about doing that. And so they get confused, or they go down, which I'm sure we'll one of the rabbit holes we'll go down is different diets and the way that people approach it and maybe the common faults with things. Or there's this massive gross overcomplication where I'm trying to pull people back, where you don't need different macro splits, high days, low days. You don't need these weird and wonderful methods that potentially just cause so much confusion and stress to someone that isn't probably conducive to their lifestyle that they're trying to lead. So they end up not getting results. So there's these two ends of the spectrum, and actually where you see results is often somewhere in between.
Definitely. And so you're obviously working with like your average Joe who's, like you say, just stepped foot in the gym, but then also elite level athlete. So I think in this episode today, I really want to discuss how people can just get to grips with the basics of nutrition, but then also how they can optimize their nutrition for their training and use it to make better progress, I guess. So just to start with, such a basic question, how do people know how much they should be eating?
This is a good question. One of the methods that we use is to get people to track their current intake first, right? And when I say track, people go, I've got to be locked to an app all day long. I've got to be logging all my food and weighing everything out. Well, in actual fact, it's not that. I think most of us are pretty terrible at being aware of what we eat, whether that's mindless snacking, whether that's not understanding portion control. So if you take a little bit of time to understand what you're currently eating, we don't deviate too far from normal recipes, normal breakfast, normal lunches, where we buy stuff even. So if you understand, you write it down in a notepad, you put it into a tracking app, whatever that is, okay, you start to understand what you're currently doing. Then you can use different methods to figure out how much you should be eating. So that could be through calorie calculators, could be through getting a coach, it could be using different formulas. Most of the online calculators will use a very, very similar equation, so they won't be too far off. But you can start to go, okay, I'm going to enter my details, I'm going to ask a coach, or I'm going to get someone to give me something that I should be eating for whatever goal I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, because I was just about to say, obviously, the question of how much you should be eating is dependent on your goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Because do you want to lose weight? Do you want to gain weight? Or do you want to maintain?
Yeah.
That's going to be different for everyone.
100%. Like that. So height, age, weight, number of steps a day, how many times you train a day, what your goal is. All of these things need to be taken into account. So you can get this information online. It's widely available. Or you like say you invest in someone just to go like, right, help me figure out how much I'm meant to be eating. Often people do that bit first and then try to fit themselves to this new plan or these new numbers that they've got to follow or this new diet that they're going to follow. Whereas we're like, well, if you understand what you're currently eating and then you get this, you can just identify where the low-hanging fruit is, where some small changes can be made to what you're currently doing to bring you closer to what you're meant to be doing.
Definitely.
And that is an infinitely easier transition than what a lot of people do is they try to jump and try to overhaul their diet and do all of these weird things. And often it leads to failure.
I know. When I was a lot younger, in my teenage years, I went through a period of disordered eating, quite restrictive eating. I really wasn't consuming a lot of calories, and I realized that I needed to gain weight because I was just suffering mentally and physically, but I didn't really know how. So I Googled something like diet to help you gain weight, and I was following a 4,000 calorie bodybuilder meal plan. I probably didn't keep that up for very long, but I so could have done with some proper guidance and some proper education as to, okay, this is how you should be eating, this is what you should be doing. And I eventually did go to a nutritionist who really helped me out with giving me calorie dense foods where I could consume them and get the calories in, but it didn't feel so overwhelming. I wasn't eating 4 chicken breasts for one meal. So that answers that question, but what should people be eating? I was hoping we could break down the 3 main macros for people that I'm sure we've all heard of, carbohydrates, proteins, fats. What are they and why do we need them?
Yeah. The main macro, like I say, you got 3 main macronutrients, then you got lots of different micronutrients. So macronutrients are protein, carbs, and fats. Protein and carbohydrates will provide 4 calories per gram. Fat is a little bit more energy dense, as you talked about there, adding energy dense foods at 9 calories per gram. You need what we find for most people is you need a balance of these. Okay, so protein is one of the things that you should be prioritizing, and often this is something there where people maybe have a skewed intake, maybe kind of struggle to get enough. Potentially,
I think it's just overlooked.
It is. I don't know if I'd say it's overlooked. I think the RDA, the general RDA, is relatively low. I think it's 0.8 grams per kilo by body weight. And actually, the research dictates that you want to kind of have around 1.2, 1.4 as a kind of floor.
Yeah.
And then you can go a little bit above that. But protein is essential for, muscle building, obviously, but it's essential for so many other things, for detoxification, for gut health, for enzyme production, for satiety. So if you are trying to diet, protein is really crucial. It's not just, say, for that bodybuilding type stuff. So protein is the one thing that if you were going to really hone in on a macronutrient, I would start with that.
Yeah, look at your protein intake.
Protein and calories, they're the 2 things that you're probably going to need to really prioritize if you want to change your body, if you want to focus on, say maintaining weight, gaining weight, losing weight. Those are the 2 kind of big players.
Okay.
Carbohydrates and fats, they maybe come down to personal preference in terms of what you prefer to eat, what you prefer to eat more of. So you can fill yourself up on the things that you actually, you want to eat that make you feel good, rather than thinking, okay, well, just to lose weight, I need to be reducing my carbs and eating loads of fat because ketogenic diet apparently is, the way to go. So we need to understand that this is where nutrition, context what are you doing? If you're doing lots of high intensity exercise, if you're doing maybe lots of endurance work, then carbohydrates are probably going to be something that you want to do because they're an energy source.
Yeah.
When they're eaten, they are digested, they're stored in our muscles, they're stored in our liver as glycogen, and that's used as energy for kind of more intense exercise. Fat, again, it's needed for hormone production, it's needed for helping to absorb fat soluble vitamins, and it's needed for a lot of the metabolic processes in our body. So again, removing one of these macronutrients, you're putting yourself at a risk of putting more stress onto your body, but also maybe going down the route of deficiencies, of an imbalance. And a lot of diets, a lot of nutrition will maybe demonize certain macronutrients.
Definitely.
So
I think
it's confusion again. Like,
I'd say it's changing slightly, and obviously, like you said, with social media now, we do have a lot more education around like diet and stuff. But for a while, I feel like carbs were kind of seen as the devil, and like my parents did the it wasn't keto, it was called the Atkins diet, I think, which was no carbs and like you can eat all the meat you want. And my mum said to me that she would have like these massive fry-ups, but all she wanted was like a piece of toast. And so for her, maybe incorporating carbs would have been a better option. And it's funny, I think I also work at quite a fancy brunch spot, and I notice a lot of, like, I'd say like the yummy mummies coming in for brunch, and they always like, they'll order like kale and
don't
fruit,
say egg white omelets.
And
egg white omelets
egg whites and kale, like no carbs, no fats. And I, maybe it works for them, but I think they've probably just got a bit of a skewed idea about what like their optimal nutrition should be.
100%. And that's very common. It's a common across different age groups, I think. And as you said, to go through a kind of a bit of a process, I do think the carbs were demonized, 15, maybe 20 years ago. Even 10 years ago, when I first started to kind of get into nutrition coaching with PH Nutrition, and we went into CrossFit, we were working with a lot of CrossFit gyms, and the paleo diet was there. And yes, you can eat carbs on paleo, but you can only eat a few. Like, there's a few fruits.
We do paleo bread at work.
So it will remove flour, it will remove grains. So you can eat, basically, everyone just eats tons of sweet potato.
Okay.
That's what happens. And they, again, it demonizes that kind of carbohydrate, but there's a mismatch between, they were doing very, very high intensity exercise, which is glycolytic, which means that you require carbohydrates to perform, this type of exercise well, and they weren't eating that much. So again, that's personal to that person. Whereas if someone is doing not a lot of exercise, maybe they're doing something more low intensity, then they don't need as many carbohydrates. They could rely on, other sources such as fat, etc., to put into their diet. So again, that level of personalization needs to be there, and often people don't get it. Like they try and find it somewhere and just get bamboozled and overwhelmed.
Or they do something because it worked for their friend. And
that is a big one.
And then because it doesn't work for them, they're like, well, I've failed. But actually, maybe it just wasn't the right choice.
Definitely.
So I'd like to move into like the fitness side of things. I'm going to ask quite a broad question, which is, obviously from your experience from coaching people, where do you think most people go wrong with their nutrition when they are first embarking on a fitness journey?
That's a good question. I genuinely think that people are scared to fuel their training and fuel their fitness. So if you're first starting out, your progression will be relatively quick. Okay, like newbie gains. Exactly. It's a real thing. So your nutrition will, say your nutrition and training is at a certain level, whereas your fitness goes up, you're doing more intense workouts, you're putting more weight on the bar, you're doing faster times, you're putting more stress onto your body. And often the case is that people don't marry their nutrition up with this. They are scared to fuel it. They're scared to eat carbs. They're scared to eat a little bit more. And they often find that then they're either really sore from like the training, or they get super fatigued, or they start to hit a plateau. After those newbie gains, even after like 3-4 weeks, they go, I'm not seeing as much progress. I'm really sore. I'm really fatigued. And often there's this mismatch between what they were eating at the start, now as their fitness level, and they haven't kind of married their nutrition. So I think doing some fundamentals, such as making sure that you are eating enough overall calories to help with the increase in output that that happens when you start exercising. Make sure you're prioritizing protein to help with that recovery side of things, and make sure that, like you said, the quality of your diet's very good to ensure you've got lots of micronutrients to help lower inflammation and help recovery.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people can get a little bit lost in terms of like, oh, I just need caffeine before my workout, and that'll get me through, and that's fine. And excuse me, yes, caffeine is a very well researched ingredient to help with exercise performance, but overall intake is going to be the key. And for me, that mismatch is where, when you're first starting out, you need to be aware of.
Yeah, everything you're saying there just chimes in with my own I guess knowledge I've gained from training and things, because I've recently been working with a coach and
doing what, sorry?
Just weight training. So my goal with her was kind of like a body recomp, like build the legs and glutes a bit, but not bulk up too much. And we actually ended up increasing calories by like 300 or 400. Obviously that number's different for everyone, but I was so shocked at the progress I was able to make once I started eating more, because not only did I have the energy for my sessions, but I started to see that like muscle growth, because I could actually make progress in the gym. And I was like, oh, I can eat a lot more than I thought I could. And I guess I maybe had a bit of a misunderstanding because of periods of time where I was like eating restrictively. So you kind of make up silly food rules for yourself in your head, like, oh, I can only have this amount of cereal, or I can only have like this amount of bread, but that's just a rule we've made up. Yeah.
I think to unpack that, like, it's fantastic that you committed to eating enough to fuel what you were trying to ask your body to do.
Yeah, and it was a little bit uncomfortable for a few weeks, because I was like, I'm not hungry. I'm just so full all the time.
Yeah.
But then I think your body adjusts, and I was able to make.
Well, you start to take away the focus from just how I feel body composition wise, how am I looking, what am I weigh, to going, wow, I like the feeling of being stronger in the gym. I like the way that I feel in terms of my output, in terms of my energy, in terms of my recovery, in terms of my mood. Like, definitely. I feel better. Oh, I'm not thinking about food all the time because I'm not hungry. And we have to, like you say, chronically people will sit on diets for extended periods of time. And they don't see results because they're not actually dieting effectively. But often the case that if they just allowed their body that little bit more at the right times, for the level of activity that they're asking their body to do, so many other factors will start to kind of improve. Sleep, mood, digestion, recovery, muscle soreness.
Do you know what? The recovery thing is so true, because I've been into my weight training for quite a long time now, but when I wasn't fueling myself properly, I'd honestly do a leg day and be written off for like 3 days because the DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, was so sore, and then I would have to wait again to train. So I was massively hindering my training rather than actually aiding it with like good nutrition. But I don't want to make this whole podcast about my own fitness journey. So
that's good. It's good insight.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me actually to kind of have some anecdotal evidence. But say someone, I guess, has a good basic level of understanding about what they should be eating and how much they should be eating, but they're just struggling to actually do it. Like, I think I used to have a bit of a warped view of how people, I suppose, gain weight, because I thought the onus is all on them, whereas we actually live in like a society that makes it really hard to prioritize good nutrition, right? Like, people live busy lives. They're just going to grab for that meal deal or the takeaway on the way home. Like, what advice would you give to people to implement some more healthy habits?
You have to create an environment that's conducive to your goal. So we think that when we are trying to follow a plan or improve our nutrition, that we just need to use willpower or we need to follow something, whereas actually you need to cultivate an environment around you that makes it easier to make better decisions. And often when people that are successful, we think it's just discipline and we think it's willpower, but it's normally a very well-crafted environment. And this environment can extend to work, it can extend to your social, it can extend to home life. And for example, if you've got a treat cupboard in your house, you have to use willpower every single day to not go in there.
We had one at home in my mum's house, and I always called it the treat cupboard. And then when I moved away, I went back and I was like, Mum, why is there nothing in there? And she, rightly so, had got rid of it all to help her stay on track with her nutrition.
Because you don't want to go. I don't want to get into the car and drive around a Tesco and then go into the Tesco and queue up and buy something. You know, that isn't what it's about. Like, if you can, like, say, remove that, or make it more difficult to do it, or let's say, like, reduce the opportunity that you're going to have to be able to make poor choices, it makes it infinitely easier to stay consistent. I think a lot of people, like I said, put pressure on themselves to be following something, 100%. But often the case is that they just put themselves in scenarios where it's damn hard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really challenging to do. And I'm not saying that sometimes it's the situation and the environment is unavoidable. Do you know what I mean? But for example, office snacks, that, like, they're the bane of our coaching. Like, constantly people going, how do I avoid the office snacks? But if you have these available, you have to be proactive to take in your own snacks, to take in things that you know that are going to help you to reach your goal because it's important to you. And if it's not important to you, then you won't do it and you will just bumble through and you won't see progress. But if you've really prioritized it, you will be proactive enough to go, I know that this is a poor environment for me. I need to take control of this. So I'm going to plan my snacks. I'm going to have this. And I'm not talking about, like, you have to take carrot sticks in and there's loads of donuts. Like, you can make something that you want to consume, but you have to create the environment to make it easier for you to stay on track, because, say, willpower is just no way you're going to be successful. if you just
I wanted to
rely
touch on that because you've said in some content that if you just rely on willpower, you're going to fail, and that actually people need more accountability. And you said accountability turns intentions into actions, and that's such a lovely little quote. I just wondered if you could kind of expand on why that's important. Yeah,
100%. So I think it's probably more relevant in January, when people have all of these intentions. They set goals and they go, right, I'm going to do this. And maybe it's even towards weddings and summers and whatever. But for me, a goal, I think we're terrible at goal setting. We set these big things, or we just say it out loud. But unless you hold yourself accountable, like, I often don't think that you turn that into an actionable thing. So if you set a goal, then you need to break it down in terms of the habits, the actions, to actually what's the steps to achieve this, right? You do it yourself, you often give yourself the easy way out, right? So if I'm going to write myself a training program, for example, I'm not going to put in thrusters and squats and everything else. I'm probably going to put in bench press and biceps because it's easy and it's like something that I can do. Whereas someone else, I'm held accountable by following a training program. I'm held accountable by following a certain diet. I'm held accountable to do certain amount of, hours. If you're trying to do business development, whatever it is, studying, reading. If you hold yourself accountable, it turns those actions that you've written down that you need to do to reach your goal, and it actually makes you do them. So I think people have good intentions. I don't think people want to eat badly. I don't think people, want to not, be overweight or unfit. But often the case, it's accountability.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that, like, going back to COVID, like, they missed the gym environment, and doing it by themselves at home was challenging. Not having the, say, the accountability of the environment, it was challenging. But for me, it's not about just paying someone. You don't have to pay someone like a coach for accountability. It could be a training partner if you were going to the gym to hold you accountable when you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I always say, like, accountability is we're going to give you a pat on the back when you're doing really, really well. We're going to give you a kick out the arse when you don't want to do it. And you can find accountability anywhere else, in a lot of places. So yeah, it doesn't need to be paid accountability.
Yeah,
you've got
definitely.
Because
I think having a PT or a coach, especially if you've got, fitness goals in mind, is so great. But obviously there is a financial element to that for people. So like, find a mate or a family member or
follow a training
something.
program online where other people are doing the same thing as you, and you can see a leaderboard, or you can get involved. Like, that's where Strava's really good, and other things, like, you can be like, oh, he did that or that, and I'm going to do it. So, that type of thing, you need to bake that in. Otherwise, like I say, I think people's really struggled with that consistency.
Yeah, and I just think that's a really good reminder for everyone listening, that these people who are achieving their goals in whatever domain that is, they don't just have, like you said, this like unwavering willpower. Like, they've created a good environment for themselves, they're disciplined, they're being held accountable, and that's enabling them to achieve these things that you probably want to achieve as well.
Yeah.
So just another thing on the grounds of fitness, you created a piece of content that I thought was really interesting, and you said, for fat loss, nutrition is more important than training, but for building muscle, training is more important than nutrition.
Yeah, I'll expand on that. I could give somebody the best muscle building diet in the whole entire world, but if they don't have the stimulus going through their body to enhance muscle growth, they're just going to gain weight, body fat.
Yeah, I think you said like no one's made gains
Walking on a
Walking
treadmill,
on a
watching Love
treadmill.
Island. Watching Love Island, yeah. Because that's what I see. Like, you know, people go to the gym, are like, great, but your goal is to get like, you know, big and
Yeah.
strong. And I was like, that requires progressive overload. It requires resistance training. Right. So that has to be the first pillar. Then you can put in nutrition. However, for fat loss, we know the primary driver is a calorie deficit. Okay. So you can create that first through reducing your
Eating
intake
less.
or increasing your output.
Yeah.
But your output doesn't matter. There's a bit of nuance to this. But it doesn't matter. You can bike, hike, trike, climb, do CrossFit, do, you know, strength training, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter, because you could not train at all. You can do nothing. You could just walk and you would still lose weight if you create a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
If you want to lose the right type of weight, you should try to do some form of resistance training, okay, to put some form of stress through your muscles. But it could be body weight, it could be strength training, to help maintain muscle mass.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to lose, losing weight, we want to lose fat. We want to maintain as much muscle mass as possible. But you have to prioritize these.
Yeah.
So if your diet is really, really terrible, but my training is really, really good, you're probably not going to lose weight if that's your goal, okay? Because you're just, you know, you're eating too much. Even though, my training is really, really good. But if your training is really, really good when you're following a strength gaining or muscle building program, or you want to get bigger and stronger, if your diet isn't optimal, you might still be in a slight calorie surplus, or you might be eating enough, and you're still going to build muscle. So you have to have those things in a line. And then the third pillar is environment, because that just brings everything together. That's what we teach on ours, like stimulus, supply, environment. So you got to have the right stimulus, you know, then you get your diet, or you got to get the right amount that you're eating, then get the right stimulus that you're going to be consistent with. And again, going back to that consistency theme, when people are trying to diet, they might think, I need to do endless cardio, I need to do certain exercises. Just do whatever you want to do, because you're going to consistently do that. If I don't like to go to spin class and I'm forcing myself, go and do rock climbing.
It's like the best exercise is the one you enjoy and you're going to be consistent with.
Yeah, definitely.
I get a bit frustrated sometimes when I see these like fat burner workouts, and I'm just like, what does that even mean?
Every workout's a fat burner.
Yeah.
Walking's fat burner. Like everything is.
And I think it's just useful for people to know, because obviously in an ideal world, your nutrition and your training would work in perfect harmony. Yeah. But trying to do both at the same time is actually really difficult for people. So just knowing what you should prioritize depending on your goal is really important.
Yes, that's a really good point. And to loop back to people why they fail when they first go in, or what they get wrong when they first go into their fitness journey or whatever, or even their nutrition journey, is that they try to do probably both of those perfect at the start. Mm-hmm. You know, if your goal is to just get fitter and stronger, then and you're starting the new gym, then just have a couple of weeks where you just focus on your training. Don't put too much pressure on your diet. Once you get into a rhythm and a pattern with this, then you can start to kind of layer on the nutrition. But if you've been training for a while and you're just kind of revisiting it, maybe you had a little bit of a break through injury, pregnancy, work, whatever, and then you've already gone through that process, you already know. So then you could probably prioritize your nutrition a little bit more, because it's not causing you so much stress to learn all these new movements and to have all of these new things to learn.
Yeah,
so
definitely. I had a couple more questions about just diet and diet specifically, I wonder if we could just talk about supplements.
Yeah, of course.
And I know that you mentioned that you're head of performance nutrition at Marchon Supplements, so obviously you're going to have a bit of understanding around that. For someone who's kind of in the swing of going to the gym and or doing some sort of exercise and they've got to grips with the basics of nutrition, are there any supplements that you would suggest they add into their regime?
Yeah. For someone that's just like general health, fitness, going into the gym. Okay. The approach that we take is always food first. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have that food first approach. However, sometimes food alone isn't always enough. Okay. Especially when we're asking our body to perform at a high level, or we're putting it under further stress. Taking dietary preferences where we may remove certain foods through preference, through, our preference of like, I don't eat meat, I don't eat this, I'm vegan, whatever. All of a sudden you do lead yourself to maybe requiring a little bit more supplementation, and sometimes it's challenging to get from certain foods. So I have kind of 3 big hitters that we would say that are ones that people maybe need to prioritize.
Okay.
Vitamin D, because we're recording this in a podcast studio, but even when it's outside, there's barely any sunlight. It's dark.
Yeah.
We don't see the sun that much. And even if you live in a hot country, we often live inside and we train inside and we cover up when we go outside and we put sunscreen on.
And sorry, you're probably going to say that, but what's vitamin D useful for? Why do we need it?
Well, vitamin D is useful for lots of different functions in the body, such as immune function, such as muscle function. It is something that's very challenging to get from foods.
Okay.
So we need it for lots of different kind of reactions in the body, and getting it and deriving it in enough from food is challenging. And from sunlight, there's limitations. So I think a supplement is a sensible thing, especially in the winter months, especially going into that kind of period where, illnesses are a little bit higher. I've got the back end of a cold. Like
Everyone's got a sniffle.
It's still like something that I would be like supplementing potentially throughout the year. It's also something that the amount of blood tests that we've done, and this comes on to omegas, that it's often quite low in people.
Okay. Yeah.
So and this is a global thing. And even the research, like I think like 64% of people have some form of vitamin deficiency across the year. There's a high amount. Okay, that would be a supplement that I would suggest. Maybe kind of like 2,000 to 3,000 IU. You'll see this on the thing, that's international units. Once a day, that will be really good covering your bases. The next one is omega-3s. It's like a fish oil or an algae oil from a plant-based perspective. Again, very challenging to get from foods, even if we eat oily fish regularly.
My friend asked me this. I said to her, I'm speaking to a nutritionist. What do you want to know? She said, well, I've heard omega-3 is really good for me, but I don't like fish. So what should I do? There,
straight away, like... You can get it from plant-based sources, but the absorption rate and the conversion is very, very poor. Okay, so they are, again, I don't know many people that eat lots of mackerel, lots of salmon.
Expensive.
Like salmon now. I think I did a newsletter. I said, have you seen how much salmon costs?
Like
that was the headline.
Quid.
It's like, for like thin, tiny fillets. So again, and the quality of those, how much omega-3s are you actually going to get? We don't know. So I would say that supplementing with this, especially in our modern day lifestyle where stress levels are a little bit higher, we are asking our body to do a lot more potentially from training. You got 2 different omegas. You got EPA and DHA, and DHA is more for cognitive function, brain function, and EPA is for more kind of lowering inflammation and helping with cellular health. So getting one that's got good amounts of EPA and DHA, which it would be a really good investment from a supplementation point of view.
Yeah.
The next one's creatine. Creatine is probably one of the most researched supplements on the planet, and it seems like every week there's a new research study that comes out in terms of a new benefit for creatine or an enhancement of some of the research that's out there.
Yeah, and I think people see creatine as like a supplement that's only used for like bodybuilders, but it's naturally produced in our bodies, isn't it?
Yeah, it's naturally produced. It's in meat, fish. Products that we eat regularly.
Okay.
So we find again that when you're training, you might require a little bit of extra. So creatine can help with cellular hydration, it can help with muscle building, it can help with power output, but there's now research going into like cognitive function, it's an antioxidant, it can help recovery. So there's lots of different uses for it, and again, it's a natural substance. So taking it every day is a really nice thing for a lot of people that are, like I say, trying to be a high performer, trying to improve their overall health.
Okay.
So, and it's relatively cheap. So those three would be like a kind of like a fundamental stack for someone that is in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously there's endless amounts of other things that you can go down the rabbit hole. But this is probably another whole podcast, but the main thing that you'll find is that any supplement that you take, if you find an enhancement or if you find a benefit, you're normally treating a deficiency. So or a need. So like if I gave you vitamin D and you felt like, oh my God, like I haven't got sick in like the last 3 months. I like feel like I'm a little bit more energized. I feel my muscle, like I feel a bit more kind of powerful.
Yeah.
I feel my muscle functions there. Or you might be deficient in vitamin D. Whereas if I've got like a sufficient level, I'm not going to see that benefit.
Okay, that's
so
interesting.
often, like when you go back to, you said, oh, my friend did this and it worked for them. Often the case that happens a lot with supplements.
Right.
Oh, I took this zinc and magnesium and I felt amazing. But you take it and you're like, I don't know. Didn't notice a difference.
Okay.
So
yeah.
usually it's treating a deficiency, and that's where we would advise people to get some form of blood work done, at home blood work. Check your physiology. Look at what's happening in your body, and you can go, I need more of these types of foods I need more zinc, I need more magnesium, I need, to lower my inflammation, I need to help with this. You can direct your diet that way, but instead of following it from some book that nutritionist has written or whoever's written these days, you're figuring out what works for you.
Yeah,
and
treat yourself as a case study.
That's it, and that can target. That's where I would say then targeting supplementation further. That's what you need to go down that route.
There's a couple more things I just wanted to ask you about. It's all over social media at the minute, but greens, powders. I think they're often promoted as helping reduce bloating, giving you energy. Obviously, it's advertising that it's going to give you like 20 different types of greens that you need. Do you think they're good? Are they worth investing in?
I am actually a big fan of greens. There is obviously different variations and different levels of quality. Okay, without mentioning loads of different brands, it's impossible. But the reason why they kind of help reduce bloating is often they can contain prebiotics, probiotics in them. Having kind of nutrient dense things such as greens, wheatgrass, spirulina, chlorella, these types of things, like they're very, very nutrient dense ingredients. So I think the benefits of them are pretty good. What I would suggest people to do, if you are going to use one, it's not a replacement for eating vegetables. Okay, like these are.
I've had 20 different vegetables today.
I'm just going to chug two cups of my greens
40,
today, and I don't need to be veg ever again. It doesn't quite work like that, but I do think that they are and these days a better addition to your diet than potentially some multivitamins that have very, very poor absorption rates, because they've been like really hard pills. So I do think that there's benefit to them.
Okay.
I just wouldn't use them as a substitute. I would use them as an additional thing to your diet. Get a small packet, okay, and then trial it and see if you benefit rather than buying, I've got a kilo of greens and it doesn't quite work for you. So
sure.
I do think that it's a modern day. I think these days. I think it's a useful thing.
Okay, and the second one, or the last one, is sleep supplements. I feel like this is something else I've also been seeing loads, like magnesium or melatonin. Yeah.
I don't think you can buy melatonin in the UK. I think
you can't. Maybe I've been looking on some illegal websites.
No, on the black web, dark web, wherever it is. No, you can buy it in the US and in certain areas.
Okay.
And I think you must. Again, I haven't looked recently, but you might be able to get it on some websites that ship over here.
Right. Would you recommend sleep supplements though, or do you think people just need better sleep practices?
You ever seen that meme where it's like the crack in the pavement and then someone stuck a plaster over it? For me, like some supplements are like that.
Okay.
Like where there's so many things underlying that you need to fix first, and just taking a sleep supplement isn't going to touch the sides. Now magnesium helps calm the nervous system. It can help does it directly affect helping you to kind of fall asleep? Some people yes, some people no. Some people have the opposite effects. So, all of these different things, CBD, all of the things that are meant to help induce healthy sleep, they may work if you have the fundamentals done.
Yeah.
So if you're not watching something super stressful, working on your screen till right before bedtime, not drinking loads of alcohol or drinking coffee later in the day, and having a hot room and, doing something stressful before bed. If you've got a cool, dark, room and you build in a bit of a sleep routine beforehand and calm your nervous system and getting to this thing, I think a lot of people can save themselves a lot of money by not going down the route of like, I'll just take a supplement and I'm meant to fall asleep.
I get you.
And melatonin is very effective, but potentially suppress your own, production of it. And yeah, I think it's a last resort.
Okay.
If you're struggling.
Or like a final addition to like your perfect nighttime routine.
A final addition is a very good way of putting it.
Okay, amazing. So I know you briefly touched on it earlier, but obviously a lot of people will have made New Year resolutions with their diet and training. What advice would you give to help people kind of really reach their like nutrition goals for the new year?
Don't try and do it in the first 10 days. You gotta, and this isn't, the things that I'm going to say now aren't the sexy things. Like they're not the things that sell programs in January. You probably got to extend the timeline that you want to achieve your goal. Okay. I think Lane Norton said this in terms of, we don't have a weight loss issue, we have a weight regain issue. And actually people can be successful in terms of losing their weight or changing their habits. It's about instilling behaviors to maintain them, to maintain that progress.
You said a really nice thing about behaviors. I don't know if you remember what it was.
Who, me or Lane?
Yeah, you made a really good piece of content about it. Like behaviors need to become your default.
So I think I may have stole this from.
Doesn't matter.
Who's the Shane Parrish? Have you read his book?
No, I've heard about him though.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think I've read one. It wasn't from his book. It was one from his articles ages ago, and it was like, you have to make your desired behavior your default behavior.
Yeah.
And that's basically changing habits, but understanding the methods that you need to put in place to, like you say, not have to constantly work against your environment, to work against like your default. And often the case that people do things that are really unsustainable to achieve results. And I'm not saying that you should only do something that you can do forever.
Yeah.
Like there will be times where you have to challenge yourself and you're not going to do this, but it's going to make me results. But you have to have that next step. You have to understand that you're building and cultivating the skills and the habits to be able to maintain it. And a lot of people don't do that. So I would extend the timeline beyond whatever it's like, right, I want to achieve this in 3 weeks, make it 6 weeks, and put less stress on your body and play the medium to long-term game. I would then look at, say, what habits and skills are you doing, and make a checklist, like a non-negotiable. Okay, so you can have ideal behaviors and then you can have non-negotiable behaviors.
Okay.
So days where you don't want to do it, okay, you don't feel in control, you just like, I can't be bothered, you just do your non-negotiables. So this could be, I get up and I drink 1 litre of water before 12 p.m. I make sure that I get protein in each meal. I make sure that I get to bed by X amount. Right, they're my non-negotiable, because those things are aligned to my goal. Okay, if you're strength training, I need to turn up to the gym 5 times a week. Whatever it is, I don't want to do it, I'm going to go. Then you've got your optimal behaviors. Okay, when you feel in control, when you have the capacity, you can then go and do these. And often the case is that we think we have to do these optimal behaviors every day, or every hour of every day, to achieve that goal. And often the case that isn't. It's that, progress over perfection kind of thing. But if you can identify these optimal behaviors, when I feel good, I'm like, now this, now this, now this, now this.
Yeah.
I make a sprint forward with my goal. And then other times I'm like, I don't disregard it. I still have these non-negotiables.
You're still moving forward.
Exactly. Like it's still my non-negotiables that I do. You got to make those what those look like is personal.
Yeah, that is such good advice. I'm really going to take that away with me, because I think whenever we set ourselves these goals, I've mentioned this before, but you forget the context
Yeah.
in which you're trying to achieve those goals. So it's so easy to write down what you're going to do at the start of the new year, but then you have a really busy day or a really busy week. Like, I think you've got young kids, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure like things are coming up all the time where you just
Yeah.
can't stick to the routine that you'd planned out for yourself. But yeah, having those non-negotiables that you're committed to is going to still at least make sure that you're getting towards a goal, but even if you're taking smaller strides.
100%. I'll use myself as an example. Like, I've always trained, like, even though I, don't look that fit anymore because I'm now a tired parent. Like, I struggled a lot last year with injury. And this year I was like, what's my goal? Is to improve the first quarter of the year. I want to just improve my fitness and get a bit stronger, get back to kind of feeling good. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my goal, umbrella goal, nothing else. My nutrition is always pretty good. Okay. So I made I wrote down my non-negotiable is to turn up to my training and follow the training program that I'm following as it's written. So last night I went to the gym at 7:45 at night because we couldn't get our kids down. I'd worked long, but I would have normally not done that. But because I've set a non-negotiable, okay, I'm going to do that. My good things are to nail, to make sure that I nail my nutrition and make sure that I get to sleep on time and, do all of these other things that are my optimal goals. But my daughter's teething. My sleep isn't very good.
Yeah.
So, but I have these non-negotiable. And you've got to make them very, very achievable. But you lock it in. And I've held myself accountable by making that. But it's not wildly out of this, out of reach that I just get overwhelmed and stressed when I haven't done it. I think I can default to that most of the time.
Definitely.
5 days a week, I can get there.
Yeah.
Even if it's 7:45 and I didn't really feel like going. And was it an optimal session? Actually, it was probably better than I thought.
It's better than not going.
But I'm making progress.
Yeah.
Even if it's a shuffle forward to my goal. And I think for a lot of people, they have this black or white and don't have that.
And I think this plays in really nicely to what your values are. Because I think people often say what their values are, but then their actions don't match that. Like, if you're like, oh, I really value fitness and spending time with my kids, and then you don't see your kids because you're working so much, and then you don't go to the gym, it's like, well, are those really your values? And I think he's the #1 CrossFit trainer. His name is Ben Bergeron. Ben Bergeron, that's the one. He said a really nice thing, and he said, thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become behaviours, and your behaviours are what shape you, shape who you are, not just what you think about yourself. And I was like, wow, yeah, it makes so much sense.
It does make so much sense. Like, for me, the behaviour is... I value health. I value feeling good.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I've never been the most, jacked person. I've never been I've been pretty fit, but I've never been the fittest. But I've maintained my weight, for pretty much 20 years, similar, and through things, and I'm relatively good shape. I prioritize it. Like, it's an important thing for me. I will always hunt out good food. And even if it's at the cost of me walking extra or paying extra, like, that's a value for me that I want to feel good. Like, I want more energy. I want to feel good. I want to feel healthier. And like you say, sometimes it can seem like a bit wishy-washy to be like writing down like what's actually, the values to you and stuff. But I think it helps you to shape what the actions that you take.
Definitely.
Like, we talk about making goals over like the quarters. So like making like, right, Q1, what's your umbrella goal? What Q2, what's your umbrella goal? It doesn't have to be specific, but if you have that, everything, it's not your North Star, but you can line yourself to it, and you can always default back to what's my values. Okay, does this align?
Yeah.
Is this an action? Is this a behavior that's going to help me to work towards a goal and align to the values that I really, really instill in myself? And if it isn't, then again, you're not going to see progress. You're that person that will be in the same position in January 2025.
Nobody listening to this podcast.
Yes, get at it.
That's so good and so helpful, and everything you said there I just think is really great. Final question to you, which I ask everybody, is if you had to give a piece of advice or a quote or a mantra to help people achieve their personal best, what would it be?
I think personal bests they're personal to you, and performance is personal. I would say that nothing worth having was ever achieved without effort. And in a day and age where we're maybe bombarded with hacks and shortcuts and tips and tricks, actually the biggest thing is just to put the work in. Like, that's the biggest hack of all. And if you can consistently do that, you will achieve your personal best, whatever that is to you. But if you try to shortcut things, if you try to hack your way to achieving a personal best, I just genuinely don't think you're going to do it.
Definitely. That's so good. A quote popped into my head and then it fell out again, so I'll just close on what you've said. Okay. Where can people go if they want to find you or check out what you're doing?
Best place is Instagram. Okay. So the coaching program that we run, the plans that we run, PH_nutrition, my personal page, Liam_nutritionist, and you'll find all of the links to the different places that I work, get involved with. But like I say, off the back of this, if anyone's got any kind of confusion or questions, like genuinely drop me a message and I run the pages myself. Trust me, and I'll respond to like anything that you need, because again, the goal is to try and simplify nutrition. So hopefully this podcast has helped in some way.
Definitely. It's honestly been everything I hoped it would be, and I'm so grateful to you for coming and chatting with me today. So thank you so much, and all the best with what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And thank you everybody for listening.